Welcome to the second of Bright Green's interviews with the Young Greens co-chair candidates. Before we go any further, if you haven't already, please do head below and hit that subscribe button. It means you will always get updates on all the rest of the interviews that we do as part of this series and every other video that Bright Green puts out. You won't miss anything. It doesn't cost you a penny, so head down and hit that subscribe button right now. So this series is with all of the candidates standing to be the next Young Greens co-chair. We've already had an interview out with Kelsey Trevitt, and tonight I'm incredibly pleased to be joined by Jane Baston, who is also standing for co-chair this year. Jane, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Chris, and thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. It's excellent to have you. So I'm going to go straight on with our first question. Hopefully it's relatively straightforward for you. Nice and simple. Why are you standing to be the next Young Greens co-chair?
A very straightforward question to start off with, I think. So I'm standing to be Young Greens co-chair because I think we've got a great opportunity to push forward a huge amount of social and economic change, but we're definitely not going to do it with the Tories in government. And I think the Young Greens have this huge opportunity to push for really radical change in our society and to campaign for issues that are really important to young people. The political landscape has been changing a lot over the last year, and it's really brought to light how the systems that we currently have don't work. The Young Greens have always been a really strong voice that speak out against our entrenched systems, and I really want us to continue doing that, challenging our capitalist systems that we have that exploit workers, the marketized education system that forces students back into halls, and our societal structures that oppress communities. We've already seen this year how people want Green politicians. They want Green Party policies in their local councils. And I really think that young people are and should be at the forefront of that. And as the Young Greens, I want us to be the voice for those radical solutions, for the young left-wing electorate, to bring about real radical change. And there are so many people, young people out there who are really disenfranchised by the main political parties at the moment, but they haven't stopped fighting for change. They're out on the streets campaigning, and that's really, really inspiring to see. We've got a huge number of really brilliant activists, councillors, members all across the country. And I think that if we really mobilise them, if we empower them to campaign for change in their local communities, then we really can bring that about to create a system that works for everyone, not just the few at the top. And we can bring along the wider social movement that's calling for things like investment in our NHS, real climate action, and a democratised society. So that's why I'm standing for Young Greens co-chair, because I think I can bring that about, and I really hope to be able to lead the Young Greens next year.
So that last point you just made lends me really nicely onto a follow-up I wanted to ask you. So you talked quite extensively there about sort of what your kind of politics is, like where you see the kind of Young Greens in the kind of wider political space. But I wondered if you could say a little bit about why you think you're the best placed person to start to tackle some of those issues that you talked about and to give the Young Greens the role that you've described it as having there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to give you my whole life story because I think that's a bit boring. But I grew up in the South in a very Tory constituency, the one that actually elects Kit Malhouse as our MP, who's the current, for anyone that doesn't know, who's the current Secretary of State for, I think it's sentencing and crime or something like that. And with parents who vote Tory just because that's how they've always voted. And then I kind of grew up, became a bit of a scientist. I studied genetics and then bioarchaeology in my master's, but all throughout that time, I did have an interest in politics, not from anything that my parents taught me, but just about the way that they were talking about issues in our hometown and the fact that they really disconnected that from the politics, from the government, from the general election. And I never really understood that. So I really came to politics through my own personal experiences, seeing the underfunding of the NHS, dealing with the UCU strikes in 2017. And I didn't really get involved in the Green Party until around 2019. And at that point, I'd already been elected as a sabbatical officer at York's Graduate Students Association, which is one of the only postgrad student unions in the country. We're very, very proud of that fact. So I've been a campaigner for almost 2 years now, doing that role because I got re-elected last year. And throughout that time, I've really been campaigning for the voices of postgrads who tend to get ignored a lot. I've learned a lot about campaigning. I've had campaigning training. I've had training in chairing meetings. And one of the things that's really important to me is giving kind of the power that you're given as an elected representative back to the people that elect you. In my role as the Vice President Academic, I work a lot with our academic reps. And a lot of that is about giving them the power to go into their departments, into their committees that they're on, and saying, these are the issues that we're having and this is how we tackle them. And I think that's really given me the skills to be able to lead the Young Greens, to develop campaigns, to lead our committee, to work with the executive and with all of our local groups as well, to build the campaigns and to really speak out on these issues. Obviously, I've been in the education space for around 2 years now, but that's a really important space for young people. And we've really seen that over the last year, and the fact that, there's been all of these amazing rent strikes that have been happening. There's been so much discussion about education and how it's been marketized and how we really need to be pushing back on that. And I've been the Green Students co-convener for the last year as well. And we've really been working with building our links with the local groups. And I think that's so important. And it's something that I really, really want to focus on over the next year. So I think I've got the skills and the experience, hopefully, to lead the Young Greens in the next year, and to give our activists on the ground the support that I think that they really need to bring the Young Greens along, and to bring local people along with us.
And so I guess, yeah, what you touched on there, a lot of that was in relation to, I guess, yeah, your role as Green Students co-convener, your role as a sabbatical officer, stuff that you've done in the student movement. So I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit, what do you see your vision being for the Young Greens, both within the student movement and also for the many, many Young Greens who are not in higher education or in further education, but are young people outside of education? So what's your vision in relation to where you want to see the Young Greens going? And also, I guess, a follow-up to that is, like, if you're elected, you'll be elected for a year. What would you, in a year's time, if you had been elected, where would you like to be? Where would you like to see the Young Greens being and think, oh, I'm really proud of having been a part of that? What's the kind of vision you have in terms of where you'd like to take the Young Greens within a year?
I love this question. I think it's a great question. I love talking about vision things, because I love to be ambitious, even if we don't achieve them all, which I think is fine. So in terms of vision for the Young Greens over the next year, so obviously I'm finishing my role as a sabbatical officer, so I'll be moving out of the student movement, which I'm going to dearly miss. But that does give me lots of opportunities to do other things. So I think over the past year, we've built a really great foundation, on the foundation that was given to us, about our groups. We've seen some great new groups start, and we've seen some really fantastic work from our current groups as well. So I'd really want to build on that over the next year. I think we need to be perhaps a little bit more ambitious about providing new training to our activists, giving our more experienced activists new skills, and also continuing our political education program, but really using the network that we have in place already to work with our local groups, our university groups, our regional groups, to mobilize them in their areas to campaign on the particular issues. And one of the really big things that I want to do is using the building group power events that we started over the last year, and use them to start campaigning, and to build those campaigns to say to the local groups, this is a campaign issue that the executive wants to work on. Come and build it with us. Let's all do it together, so that it's not just the executive, it's not just a single local group, but it's all of us doing it together. So that's kind of a campaigning thing. I also want us to look at being more proactive in our communications, and particularly our campaigns as well. I do feel that we've been a little bit reactive this year, which is understandable with the pandemic. There's not really a lot else that you can do but kind of react to the unexpected, because you can't really guess what's going to happen. But I think I really want us to start looking at some particular issues, maybe around housing, maybe around workers' rights as well, which kind of leads me on to another area that I want to work on, which is particularly with trade unions. And I think that's really important, about encouraging trade union membership within our young people, to make sure that they get workers' rights, to campaign with them, to really build those links as well. I also want us to be supporting our local councillors more. So we have some amazing local councillors, Chris, as I'm sure you're aware, being one of our newly elected local councillors, and to really support them, but also to support candidates as well, and look at how we diversify that. So I'm aware that I've kind of rambled on a little bit, but in terms of what I would want to see in the next year. I think continuing our political education program, but also really seeing campaigns from our local groups that are cohesive together, where we're all speaking with a particular voice on a particular issue and saying, you know, this is something that's really important to the Young Greens, to young people, and this is a change that we want to see, whether it's bringing rent controls or whether it's ending firearm rehire. Kind of bringing groups together and really having that sense of community within the Young Greens, which we already do have, but building that together so that we're all working together across the country, I think is really important for me. And that would be the big thing that I would want to do, because I'm really proud of the Building Group Power events that we've done this year and the way that we've brought our groups together. So I think that would be my key thing.
So now, obviously, the Green Party has a long history of working on, I guess, issue-based campaigns around working within social movements and the student movement and the labour movement and so on. But there are some people in the Green Party who would listen to what you just said and they would think, well, you haven't really mentioned the core purpose of the party there, which is what they would describe as the core purpose in terms of winning elections. And they would say, well, all that's well and good, but that's not really the business of a political party. The political party shouldn't be asking the wrong people to do the right things. It should be getting the right people elected. And so do you see there being a tension between that focus on non-electoral campaigning and fighting elections, and how would you respond to that criticism that would say, well, if you're spending your time building campaigns around fire and rehire, really what you should be doing is getting councillors elected, potentially getting MPs elected later down the line in order to stop those things from happening in the first place rather than having to campaign against them. So how would you respond to that?
I think my initial response would be that building those campaigns is how we get people elected. Because if you're building that activist base in a particular community, if you're reaching out into the community, if you're campaigning on the issues that a community cares about and that are really impacting that community, then when it comes around to an election, you're going to have people that are going to want to come and campaign with you, people that will know the councillors that you're standing, people that will know your local activists, and who will say, yeah, I know those people, I know those Green Party councillors, and I'm going to vote for them because I know that they'll stand up for me, they'll fight for me. And I think, you know, the two can seem like there is a tension, but I really don't think that there is, because if we think about in terms of elections, we don't have elections in every place all the time, other than obviously a general election, which isn't happening for another 2.5, 3 years at this point. And I think, you know, building our base of activists and building campaigns that are fighting on issues that young people really care about. Not only do we get more people to join the Green Party, to see that the Green Party is fighting for things that they really care about, but we also raise our profile as well, which is really important when it comes to elections. So I don't think there is a tension between the two. I think we have to do both. And I think that is difficult because obviously we all have capacity issues, we all have, you know, jobs and family and friends and things that we have to do. So we do have to decide where we want to focus. But for some groups, say for example in York right now, we're not having another local election for another 2 years. So for me in York, focusing on an electoral campaign is almost pointless. Instead, I would want to be campaigning on things that are impacting my local society, whether that's the river flooding all the time or the fact that we have really poor lighting across one of the main walkways from the university. There's no point for me to focus on electoral politics. Instead, I want to be campaigning on those issues instead. So I don't think there is a tension. I think the two complement each other, actually.
So I want to move on now to the Green Party as a whole. So one of the aspects of the Young Greens co-chair role, which is unique to the other members of the Young Greens executive, is that you would have, if you were elected, a formal position on a number of other bodies in the Green Party, provided that the constitution doesn't get amended at some point in the future, although that's an ongoing discussion for another day. So you'll have a seat on the Green Party executive, you'll also have a seat on the Green Party's political committee, but often the Young Greens co-chairs end up taking seats on other bodies that are subcommittees of the executive and so on and so on. So you're going to have a really crucial role to play in the future direction of the party as a whole, not just the Young Greens. So my question to you is, what do you see as the kind of major challenges and opportunities that are facing the Green Party as a whole right now?
Yeah, again, a difficult one, because I think the party's expanding a lot, and there's a lot of, you know, tension on our time and our money and how we spend things. But I think keeping the momentum up between elections, as you know, as we just talked about, the fact that, you know, we do have a focus on elections and we are a political party, we want to get people elected. But what we do between elections is also really important. So making sure that our policies are robust, that we have evidence to back them up, that our campaigners and our activists and people that are door knocking and dropping leaflets know about our key policies and know kind of how to back them up and how to defend them as well. I think is really important, and a challenge for us as well, because some things can be, you know, incredibly complex. Like, you know, education seems like it should be a relatively simple area, but then you get down into the nitty gritty and it becomes very complicated. And it's like that with everything. And, you know, not everybody has to have, you know, PhD level knowledge on everything, but being able to explain our key policies and the key things that appeal to voters, I think is really important. I think as well, reputation is another thing that is challenging the Green Party a little bit. I know that there have been decisions in recent months that have reflected somewhat badly on the party, particularly from members, but also from those outside as well. And I think we need to be thinking about our internal systems and how we do things internally to make sure that they are robust and that we can defend any decisions that we take. So obviously I'm not currently on GPEX. I don't know much about how it works, but I think from an outsider's point of view, those would be the two things that I would say are facing the party right now.
So you mentioned there decisions that you think have harmed the reputation amongst members and potentially outside of it. Do you have any of those decisions in mind that you're referring to when you say that?
I do. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable mentioning them right now. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. There's been large upsets in the party. So I don't think I'm going to mention them, but I think anybody that has been paying attention to the Green Party probably knows what I'm referring to. So yeah, I'm not going to mention them if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. I won't push you on it, but for anyone watching, if you want to guess what those decisions are that Jane's referring to, please do stick them in the comments and discuss it there. So I wanted to move a little bit broader now, and it kind of ties back into some of the stuff that you were talking about at the beginning. You talked a lot about, I guess, and in fact, throughout what you said throughout the interview, one of the things you've kind of talked a lot about is, I guess, the relationship between the Green Party, the Young Greens, and wider movements, the trade union movement, social movements, campaigns, and so on. What do you see as the place and the role of the Young Greens in the kind of wider left infrastructure and ecology within the UK?
Yeah, so I think this is actually a really exciting question at the moment. Obviously, the Greens, and particularly the Young Greens, have always been on the left, always had very kind of left-wing policies. And I think that's something that we've always stuck by. And there has been a space that has been open for quite a while, actually, I think now, in my opinion, at least, on the left, particularly within young people, in who represents those views, particularly with, you know, I don't want to mention the L word, but with Labour moving more to the right, and the way that their leadership is, there is kind of almost a vacuum of people talking about youth issues and left-wing policies. And I think that's something that's really exciting. It's something that the Young Greens do have a role there, but I think we could really take that up a lot more. We could be a lot more vocal about our policies, a lot more vocal about what we're fighting for and the type of society that we want to see. And I think a lot of that is working with kind of external organizations, whether that's the NUS, whether that's student unions, whether that's trade unions, even though I'm obviously aware not all of them are on the left, the majority are, but also with, you know, the different grassroots campaigners. And, you know, I'm not going to know all of them across the country. And I think that's something for a lot of our groups to know in their local areas, who those particular campaigners are. But whether it's working with people like the People's Assembly or ACORN, really kind of linking up with them, supporting them in the campaigns that they're running, and being proactive on it as well, and saying, you know, we want to work on this campaign. This is an issue that we think is important. Come and work with us on it. So I think that's kind of where I would see us standing.
Thanks, Jane. So I have one final question for you, and it's slightly more light-hearted than everything else we've discussed so far. So my final question for you is, out of everybody in the Green Party, who inspires you the most and why?
Oh, you see, now I sat there and I thought about this question after I watched Kelsey's interview, and it was so difficult because I can't pick an individual person. I think in terms of inspiring me to actually join the party, it would probably be Rosie Rawle and Tom Hazel, because they were the Young Greens co-chairs when I joined, and that was really the reason why I joined, was because of the Young Greens. But I think in terms of what I want to do as co-chair, I'm going to have to pick all of our Young Green councillors, and I know that's a huge group, but I think they really are kind of the reason why we do a lot of the work that we do in the Young Greens, is to get Young Green councillors elected, to get youth voices in councils, to bring about the change that we want to see. And that's kind of, for me at least, the reason why we do all of the groups work that we do, why we do the political education work that we do, why we do all of the action days. So I'm aware that's a really rambling answer, but it's the only one I have because I'm indecisive and can't pick a single person.
Yeah, you've named about 15 people there as your single most inspiring person, but it's fine. I'll let you off. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jane. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So that was the second of our interviews with the Young Greens co-chair candidates. As I said at the start, you can catch the first of those interviews with Kelsey Trevitt on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find the links anywhere around. They'll probably be floating around my head somewhere here or over there or down below. You'll find it. We'll also have interviews coming up with the remaining two candidates for the co-chair position. The best way to make sure that you don't end up missing those interviews when they're out is to head down below and hit that subscribe button. It means you get updates on all of our future videos. You won't miss any of them, and it doesn't cost you a penny. I have just a few final bits and pieces of admin before I let you go and enjoy your evening, morning, daytime, middle of the night, whatever time you're watching this. The first is just to say, if you're a member of the Young Greens, you will receive a ballot to vote in the election. You will be able to vote between the 3rd of July and the 18th of July. I think that's right. That's what I've written down. You will also find that you'll have elections going on for a range of other positions in the Young Greens, including the other members of the executive. So Bright Green is going to be running articles from lots of those candidates for the other positions on the executive. So please, if you want to check those out, head to bright-green.org and you'll find all those articles on our website. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, if you like the work that Bright Green does, if you want to support us and you want to support a better media, we are exclusively funded by the kind and generous donations of our readers, watchers, supporters. So please do head to bright-green.org/donate. There'll be a link down below as well, and set up a regular donation. We ask people to give just £5 a month. And that will really contribute to us being able to put on more videos like this, to cover more things that are going on in the Green Party, in the Scottish Green Party, in the Green Party of Northern Ireland, and of course in all the rest of our coverage on the Labour movement, on social movements, and the left more broadly. The last thing to say is, if you've agreed with anything Jane has said this evening, if you disagree with anything, please do let us know in the comments down below and start a conversation down there. So that's everything from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.